Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Mary Sue. Technically, it's hosted by Todd and Wes. And Mary Sue is a segue into a punchline reflecting some aspect of the writer or the show's personality. Furthermore, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everyone to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Goodbye Sparky, the audiobook that you'll never want to end. Say hello to Goodbye Sparky. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I'm Todd.
And we are filmmakers. We like to watch and review films and study them, break them apart to see what we can learn about the process of filmmaking, which is always interesting. Sometimes whenever I go to make something, I use a lot of what I see and learn from whatever we've done, like over the 8.5 years we've been doing this show. Yeah.
Crazy.
I've learned a lot. Like, this has been a really fun process for me. And I know that one of the big dogs in the industry, I've learned a lot from on all kinds of fronts. Talking about David Fincher, of course. And it's been really informative, and the last film I did was specifically made in large part so that I could have that style in my, portfolio. And I think whenever you're at this level of still trying to find your big break, that's important to figure out, like, if someone doesn't know me, how am I demonstrating that I can do the things that I want them to let me do? Right? If I go to a studio and said, hey, give me a few $1 million to go make a movie, they're going to be like, who let this guy into this room? Unless I can be like, here's my portfolio. Here's some of the things I've made. Here's different styles I like to work in. And being able to point for them to be able to say, oh, he can do the thing that he's wanting us to let him do. That's a very important part of the process. Ideally, I would be able to do it, as a feature film instead of a short film, so that they can say, oh, he can do this for more than 2 days, right? A short film, anyone can kind of have their shit together for a couple days. To make a movie takes months of continued excellence, and to be able to balance scheduling. There's so much that goes on with just wrangling cats into a production, between your actors, between locations. And it's pretty easy to say, hey, can I use your house for a few hours? It's really hard to be like, hey, can I use your house for a couple weeks? Like, if you've never tried to do that, you may not understand why people go and build locations in a studio. They say, oh yeah, you know what? It's so much cheaper to just go film in this house, right? Like, or we could spend a couple $1 million recreating this exact house that exists already in this neighborhood in a studio lot. Like, why would you ever want to do that? You could say, well, you know what? It's not just hard to convince homeowners to leave their house for 2-3 weeks, let alone maybe a couple of months, but it's also really hard to convince a neighborhood to say, hey, we're going to park all these trucks in your neighborhood. And people are going to be coming in and out. And we're going to have lights running until 4 or 5 a.m. Like, that stuff is really hard to get away with in a neighborhood. Therefore, hence, let's go build, spend a couple $1 million. And now we can shoot during daytime hours, instead of if some of this movie is taking place at night. Suddenly it's like, oh, we don't have to stay up crazy hours. We don't have to get upside down on our sleep schedule. We can instead just go shoot like a regular time, where everyone is sane, and we can keep our schedule. We can set up lights and leave them. We can operate on a grid instead of bringing out all these cranes and crazy lighting rigs and moving in and out and bothering neighbors and dealing with cops because they're sick of us, and paying off neighbor or whatever. Like, there's so many headaches that go into shooting on location that you can avoid by doing something in a completely what looks like unreasonable way. It becomes way more reasonable once you start thinking. And so whenever you've done a movie, a studio or a production company says, they understand how to manage all those aspects. And so ideally, that's what I would be able to do. But guess what? I don't have an extra few $100,000 that I can throw around in that kind of way. And so short films is a means to an end, and that's part of the means. And hopefully I get to the end, TBD. But yeah, so doing things with intention, I think, is one way to build out your career and that career path. And this show, us doing this week in and week out, has been a huge for me, because I don't take it for granted. I don't just show up and say, oh, let's just talk about a movie. I show up and say, hey, here's what I learned from this movie. At no point am I saying I know everything. This is a process for me of getting better at something that I want to do with my life. And so hopefully some of that comes through these episodes for our listeners. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Feel free to chime in or introduce the film.
And I think it's important to say that you don't know everything. Like, I don't think that Fincher knows everything. He might know more, and he might have more experience, but he doesn't know everything. And I don't think that he would say that he knows everything about film. Yeah. I mean, like, we all also are an amalgamation of our experience and what we love and what we've learned. So I don't think that there's a way that you can learn everything about film and stories and how to tell them. Like, so anyway, I think that's smart to say. This has been a huge thing for me too. I have always enjoyed film, but I found a newfound love for it in these weekly conversations with you, where I learned so much. Like, I've learned so much about what I'm watching and why I like or don't like what I'm watching from having these conversations with you. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched a movie just to watch it, and I've noticed something that you've talked about on the pod, and I'm seeing it in real time. It's kind of like, oh, I can see how the sausage is being made now. And I think that the best movies, you don't see anything, right?
Yep.
I mean, like Training Day is a perfect example of like a movie where I don't see anything. I don't see the camera. I don't see the acting. I see nothing. There's a story happening in front of me. But if I want to, I can take a step out from what I've learned in these conversations over the last 8 years. Has it been 8 years? Jesus. Yeah, about. I can take a step out, and I can force myself to look outside of the lens and see how these things are made. And it's so cool. It's so cool. I mean, some of my favorite things that, like, even my kids like, because I've gotten them into movies, is the behind the scenes and how things are done, how things are made, how the sausage is made. Mm-hmm. And they love that kind of stuff, because as much as they love stories, they love the art of telling the story too. And I think that that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's the art of telling the story, not always just the story, which is the main thing. Obviously, the story is the main thing, but how you tell the story is also super important. I mean, Nolan's The Odyssey is coming out next year. That's a story that's been around for thousands of years. Like, literally, it's been around forever. We know the story, but how you tell it that's the artistry, because you can see it on a page and you can read it, but when you're watching it, it's a whole different thing. So I think there's a lot to be said about how that's done. It's kind of like, it kind of blows me away a little bit, because it's like music for me. There's 12 notes, and yet, there's brand new music that you've never heard that comes out every single year, every day, right? How is that possible? It's possible because the way that I want to write the same 4 notes that have been played 1,000 times is different, because I'm my own person. And it's the same way with film, only there's a million additional things that go into it more than music. And it's such an art. It's beautiful.
It's pretty damn cool. Yeah. So what are we covering today, man?
Today, speaking of art, we are covering David Fincher's Zodiac. What year did this come out? This was in
2007.
7. Wow. So yeah, if you haven't seen this, please pause the episode and go watch it. I believe it is streaming on Canopy.
And Netflix.
But otherwise you can rent it for $4 or something.
Well, it's on Netflix.
Please pause the episode and go watch it because we're gonna spoil all the things.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Is it on Netflix?
Yeah.
Oh, well, didn't realize.
Yeah. We'll cover a handful of things. It's hard to talk about a Fincher film without at least touching on some of the cinematography. And so we'll talk about that, some of the angles, handheld versus stable. We'll also talk about some of the story and writing, true crime stories, identifying with the characters, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Well, first off, how did you say Savides? Savides.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And a quick synopsis of the film. Between 1968 and 1983, a San Francisco cartoonist becomes an amateur detective obsessed with tracking down the Zodiac Killer, an unidentified individual who terrorizes Northern California with a killing spree. It's directed by David Fincher, screenplay by James Vanderbilt, based on the book by Robert Graysmith, cinematography by Harris Savides. It's featuring Jake Gyllenhaal as Robert Graysmith, Robert Downey Jr. as Paul Avery, Mark Ruffalo as Detective Toschi, Brian Cox as Melvin, Chloe Sevigny.
Sevigny.
Sevigny, yeah. I can't ever get that name right. As Melanie, and John Carroll Lynch as Arthur Lee Allen.
Come in peace. I don't want any trouble. Dave?
I really don't want to touch you right now, Paul.
Just trying to do my job.
Oh, really? Well, now I can't do mine. We already screwed up the amount of tips we got on this thing, and you've just freaked out the entire state. I've got Napple, Vallejo, and DOJ looking at me sideways, and Riverside's telling me I'm on a snipe hunt.
Jesus, hey, Sherry Joe Bates was a gift. I gave that to you. You and Armstrong never would have found
This may not be Zodiac. Does that matter to you? Does it matter that Riverside may not be able to make a case against their suspect because of you?
Tell it to Sherwood. I'm out here beating the bushes, trying to draw him out. We're in this together.
Well, we're not in anything together, Paul, because I'm not interested in upping my circulation.
Oh, boy. He wrote me. He threatened my life.
Hey, Bullet. Been a year and a half. You gonna catch this fucking guy or not?
Go fuck yourself.
Happily.
You should have called me, Paul.
Dude, so... yeah, 18 years later, Zodiac looks like it came out last summer. What do you think, man? It's probably been a while since you watched it. And so does it still, I don't know, create a full experience for you now?
Yeah. Well, I love Gyllenhaal. I love Ruffalo. I love Downey. I mean, so Ruffalo is interesting because I don't always like all of his roles, but in this, this is a great example of what he can do. He's just fantastic in this film, and it's another one of those movies where I think that the movie itself disappears, and I see the story. The one thing is I felt like it was long. I felt like there were moments where. There's just a lot not happening. And I think I understand why, because there's a lot of time that passes. I mean, it's from 1968 to 1983. So we need to it can't just jump from 68 to 83 or from 71 to 83 or whatever. And it does jump. But we have to spend some time in these eras. We have to spend some time in 68, 69, 71, 74, 79, whatever. We have to spend some time in these areas. So it needs to feel like a lot of time has passed. And so that's why I think he made it as long as it is. I think normally a movie like this could be 2 hours, but because it spans 15 years, it needs to feel long. And so it does. And I think so while that's kind of a little bit of a complaint of mine, it's not really a complaint. It's just an observation, I would say. It does feel long, but I think that's with purpose. Because, everything Fincher does is with purpose. I don't think there's a moment of anything on film that he's put out that is not thought about and with purpose, famously. 100 takes per shot. I think the story is really really well done. I think that there are some really visceral moments. Like the one specifically was the stabbing by the water. I've never experienced. I don't think I've ever experienced a stabbing on film that I felt was more real. I mean, maybe Saving Private Ryan, but that wasn't as drawn out, I feel like, as this. Like, that was like a really crazy moment for about 5 seconds. This felt like, I don't know, it felt like 2 minutes, even though it was probably, 20 seconds. Felt long. And I think a lot of it was the camera positioning. I mean, with the guy, as he's getting stabbed, we're looking at his face like this. And with the girl, I think for a minute we are too, but then she turns her on her side and starts stabbing her in her stomach. And it's just so, I mean, it was really hard to watch. And it wasn't even gory. It felt that real. Yeah. I felt the performances were really strong. The camera work was amazing. The lighting was exactly what you'd expect from a Fincher film. I mean, I could feel Fincher in the shots. The fact that it was based on a true story and that I live in this area. I mean, I live, 30 minutes from Vallejo. Like, I'm not far. That's I mean, Napa is an hour and a half away. Not even. It's an hour away. So, I'm here, and so that also had a layer of interest for me. So I loved it. I thought it was great. It's a really, even though it's 2.5 hours, it's a really wonderful experience and watch. I did love the moment. Also, I feel like there were these moments that happened that were kind of like disconnected from other things. Like the moment where Robert, Jake's character, Gyllenhaal's character, walks into the store and sees Arthur. And Arthur says, "Can I help you?" And he says, "No." But and then he just stares at him, because he said earlier in the film, he's like, "I just want to look him in the eye. I want to know who he is and look him in the eye." And I think that's the last time we see Jake Gyllenhaal, his character. I don't think that we see him after that, because then it skips 7 years later, and we see the kid who's shot and lives from the beginning, like the first kid who shot and lives. We don't see him again. So that's like the last time that we see Gyllenhaal's character, when he finally gets to see. And I don't know if that really happened. I like to think that happened. And maybe that's one of those, those liberties that you can take in film. You can like give some kind of like a piece of closure that maybe didn't happen, but you want to happen. And maybe I'm not sure if the scene with Jake, when he goes down to the basement of the guy, the theater proprietor, when he goes down into that guy's basement, I'm not sure if that really happened, but that's a real wonderful moment where you think that Jake has found, or that Robert has found him, but in reality, it's just really a creepy, awful dude, weird dude. So anyway,
maybe just a creepy
and then you learn
moment
at the end that he was never found, maybe he was, but he died, but Arthur dies. So I don't know. It's kind of nuts. And that I live out here was just added another layer of interest for me. And how does it hold up for you? Because I know you've seen this probably multiple times.
Yeah, many times. And it's same experience probably every time, since I assume I saw this in theaters, but I can't quite remember because I've seen it so many times, I think. It's still... it's kind of hard to pin down in a lot of ways. On the one hand, it's hard to say otherwise, but it is riveting. And I don't like to think I have pretty strong opinions about true crime, and so I don't like to think of these stories in that kind of light, as something to be riveted by. But I think that's also one of the things I really appreciate and love about this movie is that it's doing it with a lot of intention. Fincher is, I think, less interested in the murderer himself and far more interested in what it does to everyone in this story. And that's the part that I really appreciate about his eye when it comes to something like this. Because you might watch this and think there's a bit of glamour that's being added to it, and it's not. That would be a really easy mistake to make, and I just don't think that's the case at all, or at least not the approach. Now, if that's what you get out of it, that's kind of on you, which kind of is, again, this kind of mirror being held up against itself in this infinite reflection of society. Because, one, the runtime, I think, is there to help us identify with everyone. It's not necessarily there, I think, to get us to feel how everything, how long it takes between all these periods. I think it's much more to get us to emotionally connect with what people are experiencing, because we're wanting the same closure that they're wanting. It's there to help us connect with their emotions of going through all this, which is also, I think, a point of the way the violence is portrayed. It's not there to shoot a bunch of cool scenes of people dying. It's there to make us empathize and really emotionally connect with the people being, killed and hurt. And so that whenever we start to look for the source of this violence, we're being placed in the same kind of emotional state with everyone else, because now we're emotionally connected with the violence. We also want to find who did it. We really want the killer to be found. And whenever you start going through these beats with everyone, whether it's that interview with Arthur Lee Miller, right, the suspicions mount, we want him to be guilty, because we've watched these brutal murders where we're identifying with the victims, not with him. We're not identifying with the killer at all. We're very much in the emotional state of the couple in that car, the guy and the married woman in that car, right? We're having those conversations with them. We're laughing with them. What does he say? Fuck off and die. And they start laughing. And he's like being teased, and those, using humor in this way, and we kind of touched on this last week, using that kind of humor helps us emotionally connect with those people, so that when they then get killed and this guy barely survives, like, we didn't want that. We're not enjoying that. And I think this is something that so many true crime stories or stories that are inspired by horrible events is that they do wrong, is that they're trying to get us to enjoy the killings, or place this bit of glamour on those things. And that's not what Fincher's doing. And that's not what you should be doing in a true crime story. Like, I don't want to be too judgmental here, but that is the stuff that I made my last short film about. It's like, it really bothers me how much enjoyment people get out of these things. And I think that's the other element of the runtime, is that we're identifying with everyone's experience of needing closure. And so when we get to the end of the film, we're really wanting to know who did it, who just give me the answer. And we don't get that closure. Like, we get really close, like we really think it's this guy, but we don't know. And you know what? We will never get the closure that we really, truly want. And so the longer, and I think if he could have justified another 20 minutes, he would have given us another 20 minutes. Because the longer you make this movie go, the more unsatisfied it is. Whenever you get to the end, you're like, you still don't know. You still don't have the answers. Because that's what they were dealing with. They were dealing with years of this stuff happening, and years of being taunted by a murderer, and still not getting to the end of that story and not knowing who did it and why. And I think that's part of the interesting element of seeing this from the part of the journalists, seeing it from the part of Robert Graysmith, and then, of course, seeing it from the inside, from the part of the detectives who are trying to do this almost in spite of all the public interest. They can't control the narrative there. And so watching, there's that moment when Paul Avery is talking to Graysmith, and he's like, this is good business for everyone but you. Like, what are you doing? and the naivete of Graysmith, who turns around and he says, "How do you mean business?" Like, he doesn't understand at all everything that's happening. This is another part of the conversation that I really love, is at the very beginning, after we see that first killing, and then we see that crazy elaborate sequence of the mail coming up the stairs and getting doled out to everyone, the secretary opening up the envelope with the first letter. And that's when they had that first conversation. And it's such an important conversation that I think is going to inform the rest of the movie, which is this conversation around, should the paper run this story the way the Zodiac Killer is saying? Right? Is this newsworthy? Is very valid conversation to be having. Yes, it clearly is newsworthy. Is it doing harm by running it and encouraging a killer? Also, yes. So how do you balance that? They never get this balance right in this movie, or probably in real life, but certainly as we're consuming it in this story, told by Fincher. I don't think they're ever going to get that balance right of getting the newsworthiness aspect and complete complementary with discouraging a killer from doing more of it. So that to me is really the whole conversation that we should be thinking about, but we just go through this path and we get lost along with Graysmith of the curiosity of it, the titillation of it. It's hard to not imbibe all of that aspect of, well, who did it? I mean, every time I watch this movie, I do the exact same thing. Google, who was the Zodiac Killer?
Yeah.
Just to see what the latest evidence points to. And because I can't remember, I can never remember. Was Arthur Lee Miller actually the best candidate, the best suspect? And it really seems like he was, but every few years someone else says, it was this guy, and people there's this perversion, and Fincher talks about this periodically, just about the perverse nature of humanity, to look at a murder scene or to get enticed by someone's tragedy. And it is perverse. It's entirely perverse. There is an element of self-protection because we want to know what we could do right and do better, and how could we protect ourselves. There is that element, but I don't think it plays entirely into the amount that we tend to gawk and to consume this stuff. At a certain point, you really are just kind of getting your rocks off on other people's pain.
I've never understood that. There is no ounce of me that wants to see any of that. I mean, and I've tried to understand it. Like, maybe it's because you don't see it every day. It's kind of like a car crash. If people drive by and they slow down at car crashes, I don't know. I don't want to. Maybe to see a busted up car, that would be interesting. I don't want to see anybody hurt ever. There's no ounce of me that wants to see that, but maybe because people don't see that every day, that's interesting because it's new. I don't know. Like, what is the draw to want to see something like that? Like, I don't know. I agree with you 100%. It's the whole about the wanting to know what we could do different. Oh, don't get in that car. Don't take a ride from a stranger in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. Don't let them touch your wheel. Things like that. Yeah, sure. That's interesting. But yeah, I've never.
Yeah, at a certain point, it definitely just seems like an excuse, though, right? Like,
right.
In general, not pointing out this movie in particular for all the reasons I've been talking about, but in general, the level of true crime consumption that's gone up over the past decade is just it's unbalanced in the benefit to joy ratio, in my estimation anyway. And so, yeah, I agree. I don't entirely get the morbid fashion, but also there's a lot of things I don't enjoy that people seem to. Anyway, yeah. So watching this movie, I just really appreciate that balance that I think Fincher's trying to strike. the violence to me is non-glorified because we're empathizing with the victims. And it's for some of the reasons that you were touching on, right? Like that couple by the lake that gets stabbed. Two things that jumped out at me. One, the close-up on their faces, especially her face, because we go from kind of a medium close on his face to a close on her face. And we know that sense of urgency suddenly hits us when we make that cut from, we're kind of in a medium wide on her, and then we go to that close up on her face, and you're just like, oh God, this isn't good, because we're suddenly pulled into her emotions so deeply.
Great point.
And then the stabbing happens. And that's the second thing that jumped out to me, is the way he does his sound effects. I just love, and I appreciate, because the stabbing sound effects that he's using there aren't the traditional gore film, you can hear the knife. It really sounds more like a punch. It sounds like he's being punched, and there's a little bit of the knife that you can hear in that audio, but it's really the pounding of the blade handle being hit, right? And that's so much real. That's so much more of reality and unheightened and stylized. And that's kind of the way, like I've done a stabbing sequence before, and that's exactly what I did. And I was just like, yeah, that makes complete sense to me if you know what real life, stuff sounds like. And so that, I think, is once again just kind of him trying to embed us deeper into reality, instead of trying to stylize it and create this sense of glamour around it. And then, so that, I will touch on a couple other things. I've kind of already shot through most of my notes here. But the other thing that I thought jumped out was the camera work. Obviously, that's number one. This might be the first time Fincher really got like 100% of what he wanted. One of the things that I think is really cool, if you dig around, and I'll link, there's a really amazing Reddit thread. There's a comment on Reddit, because this was shot mostly, I believe, on the Viper, which was an old, one of the first digital cameras that was kind of unwieldy. But we covered this, I think, on Miami Vice, Michael Mann, as well as Collateral. And this is the same camera. And yet it looks wildly different. And that's the style choices brought on by the directors. And based on this comment, actually, I think the cinematographer on, I forget if it was Miami Vice or Collateral, walked away because he didn't like the way Michael Mann was wanting to shoot this thing. It was so grainy and it was just like gritty, and he was just like, this is not my style. And so he left. That's how much an impact, your director can really make on the image. And yet it's also capable of this, which is crazy clean. Like, this is one of the cleanest images of any movie ever made. Like, it's just crazy clean. And the process of getting this was elaborate. Like, go, and again, I'll link this in the show notes. But Harry Savides is a really interesting director, because I really love his style so much. He's one of the cinematographers that I really hope to emulate. And if you watch some of his projects, go watch Birth. I think it's called Birth. Sorry, I forget. But it's Nicole Kidman in this movie about this story where she thinks her husband is being reincarnated in this child. And it's a crazy story, but the lighting on this thing is crazy. And Savides was always pushing what he called the toe or the toenail of the curve. And the curve is just this, a film stock's ability to, like, in an exposure, how much you can get out of the head and the toe of it, right? There's a curve of exposure, and how much you can get out of those details from the highlights and the shadow really depends on how you're lighting it and how you're treating it in post-processing. I mean, it's a whole thing, and you really have to know your stuff. And he was always pushing to get the absolute most out of each end. If he's shooting a daylight, he's really trying to preserve all those details in the highlights. And if shooting at night, he's really trying to preserve all those details in the shadows. And from other stuff that I've read, not from this comment that I'll link, but I've studied this guy before, and one of the things that happens, I think, on Birth is he pushes the envelope so far that sometimes they'll have to go reshoot a scene because it was like, I pushed it a little too far. We couldn't get any details out of those low lights, out of those shadows. And so we need to go reshoot that. But he's just pushing it and he's freaking people out along the way. But 9 times out of 10, it comes out exactly the way he wants because of all the testing that he's doing. He's really putting his film stock through the paces. And if you go and read this comment that I'm going to link you to, it's a guy who I think he said he did some DIT work with Savides. And so he got to have these really elaborate conversations about his technique and process. And they just sat and did all kinds of tedious work with this camera under a million conditions of like, okay, yeah, we're going to see what it can do in the highlights and shadows and what can we preserve and bring out of this exposure and this exposure and this exposure. But then on top of that, we're going to test all these lighting conditions and okay, can we mix stuff? Can we do a double exposure and take the highlights from this exposure and blend it with the highlight from the rest of the middle gray and low lights on this? Just tons, right? And so when you're watching Zodiac, you can start to see like every single part of this exposure was accounted for. And that goes into the details of Fincher for sure, but also the details that Savides prepared to get out of it. Probably knowing, yeah.
You said this is it's a film camera.
It's
a digital camera. So can they,
camera.
When they're testing, can they test and see it right away at this stage? Like, or do they have to like go put it into post, like try put it into color and do that kind of testing and everything like that?
You would want to do the rest of that process, yeah.
Okay.
And so that is a big part of the process of doing a proper camera test. You're going to say, okay, what does the end result look like that we want? Okay, cool. And then how does this camera hold up to this light in this exposure, this fill light, right? And then you're going to just step process every part of the way. Like, okay, here's what this particular image looks like in middle gray where everything is exposed properly. Okay, now in post with the same setting, what does it look like if we push the film stop, so to speak? Okay, we'll push it half a stop, full stop, 2 stops, 4 stops, 6 stops. Oh, at 6 stops, this is all milky and there's nothing left to pull out. Cool. Now what happens if we overexpose? We do all that same idea, but now we're going to overexpose it. Maybe we're going to make the light itself in the setting, an extra stop, and then 2 stops, and then 4 stops. And then we're going to go through that whole. So it's just a matter of figuring out what your sensor responds best to under all these different conditions. Because you might be on set and your light puts out what it puts out. You're at 100% of this LED and you're like, oh crap, okay, this part of my image is now 2 stops underexposed, but based on my testing, I know that's actually going to be exactly what I want. Or, okay, it's not exactly what I want, but it will be good enough because I know I can get in this pipeline, I'm going to be 2 stops underexposed, but I can bring it up half a stop. It'll be a little noisy, but I also know that we're going to crush the blacks a little bit and I can run a denoiser. And then suddenly it's still going to get me just close enough to where I can print it. And no one's going to say, you for 2 seconds, that was a little grainy. It's fine. It's going to work in the edit it's a crazy amount of details that you're working through whenever you're figuring out what you want. And Savides was second to none in figuring out his process.
I mean, because I have it here and I'm scrubbing through, just looking at stuff, and like there's so much information in the dark.
Yeah.
Because it's a very dark movie. I mean, even the daylight shots are like, they're either lean towards yellow or blue or whatever, but they're not saturated at all. It's like very desaturated, and there's information everywhere, even if it's evening time and we're inside and they're in the background, it's dark, like I can see everything, and it's like super, there's information everywhere. And I think that it's almost like it's, you know, how if you're filming something, whatever is in focus, that's where your eye goes, right? So if the thing that you're filming, the thing that's in focus is on the left-hand side, then that's where your eye is going to lean towards. But that doesn't mean that there's not information everywhere else. And so you're still taking that in. And I feel like even though everything is in focus everywhere, I'm still looking at the thing I need to look at, but there's information everywhere. And it's like just crazy beautiful. And one of the things that I like about Fincher too is that, like, yeah, he's not afraid to do shallow depth of field, but at the same time, like, he's not afraid also to do deep depth of field, like where everything is in focus and we've got, 20 feet from the foreground to the background, but everything is in focus. And I think that that's been kind of lost lately, where a lot of stuff is shot really shallow and really super close up, and Fincher is not afraid to take wides. He's also not afraid to go in close and, like, do more shallow when it's appropriate and you're wanting to see a reaction on a face. But he will shoot super wide and let you see everything and feel everything. And wow, yeah, it's a great point on that camera, man. That's crazy.
Yeah,
so beautiful,
really sick. And yeah, he's definitely not afraid to, like, use the location and build out the location. He uses green screen and visual effects in a way that helps the story come to life in an intuitive, like, organic way, not to make it all flashy for the sake of being flashy, and help communicate something to the viewer that he otherwise wouldn't be able to communicate.
Speaking of that, I saw before we watched this, actually a couple weeks ago, the scene where they arrive at the taxi.
Yep.
That's blue screen. Mm-hmm. Like, all the road and the distance and stuff is blue screen. I would never have known that. And so can you explain to me why is that one of those reasons to do something on a set, is, like, money? Like, maybe he's like, we're going to spend a week here. It's going to be really difficult to have the mist right at night, every single night, to, like, block off this block for a week and whatever. So we're going to do it in a studio with a blue screen. Is that why he would do something like that?
Yeah, I would think, I know the scene you're talking about. I don't know that I've ever heard his exact reasoning. I think in my mind it would be to get it period accurate in the background, right? Maybe there's some houses down there that they didn't want to set deck, or maybe the skyline itself, the city is just got some era inappropriate things happening, and it would just be easier to rebuild it in post. He can be very nutty, in my opinion, when it comes to detail. Now, we love that about him, but as a filmmaker, I'm like, you're burning so much cash. And this is why you probably don't get to make all the movies you want to make, is because of how wildly inefficient you are. There's this clip of him talking that's been making the rounds, where he's like, why wouldn't I get, more sets? We spent all this time getting on location, and we've got all these actors there. We've got all this lights set up and these expensive people around to run the lights and to run the camera. Like, why wouldn't I want to get the best performance and to get some extra takes? And I'm just like, there's a very easy reason for that. It's because of, yeah, you're right. They are very expensive. And you know what that means? Instead of shooting this in 2 months, it takes you 5 months. So that just skyrockets all the cost of doing this. And then you're doing visual effects for stuff that may not necessarily be all that important, that you could probably, rotoscope out in post for a fraction of the cost. But okay, like, get your 40 or 50 takes, wear out your cast, and yeah, maybe get something slightly better. I just think that last 5% that he's killing himself over is going to be the thing that gives him, because I remember this quote from Kubrick, who got towards the end of his life, and maybe this is apocryphal, maybe he didn't say this, but I feel like I've heard a quote where he said, I wish I'd made more films. And Kubrick was way, like, I'm tongue in cheek when I called Fincher nutty, but Kubrick was actually pretty wild in his detail and how far he would go. I've seen documentaries about him where he would take photos of entire towns and reconstruct it in his bedroom, like those photographs, and build, and like, just before he could feel like he knew how to make a film, he had to redo all this. I'm like, dude, like, it's okay to sometimes just have a good idea, have a shot list, and show up and get what you need. Like, no one's going to think less of you. But his mind operated in the way that he really just needed those things. And I think that's Fincher's gift and curse. Like, that extra 5% that he's getting, I think, is skyrocketing his budgets. And I don't think the quality difference is going to be that wild in what we experience as a viewer. I think he can get all those same things without the blue screen probably on that street, unless that was just a studio backlot. Maybe it was, and maybe that's what I'm missing, is he actually just reconstructed that because the houses don't exist anymore or something. And okay, I can buy that. But yeah, I don't know if that really answered anything, but those are thoughts that I have. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just why would you do that? But I think you gave some great reasons why, like, maybe the buildings aren't there, don't exist anymore. It's it's 20 what year does this come out?
2007.
Yeah. So like it'd be pretty different, and that makes sense. But I was gonna say like something else. So well, first off, yes, he is notorious for doing 100 freaking takes. Like the first scene in Social Network, he did 100 takes of them sitting at the table talking to each other.
99, Todd. He did 99.
99. It's like, F you, man. Just do one more. Like, come on. Golly, edging. Talk about it. Anyway, there's one interesting. So there's so many things that, like, I think make a director really good, or make a film really good, and I think they're unquantifiable, honestly, in a lot of ways. But some of them are very quantifiable. Of course, lighting. Of course, the getting a good performance. Of course, camera movement, all that stuff, angles. But there's also choices. And I think one great example of why Fincher is so freaking good is in his choices of who they're going to he's going to show on camera and when, for how long. So the scene right after that, scene we just talked about, the cab scene where they're in the street, you have what's his name? You have Toschi going into the house to talk to the kids that saw the guy in the cab. We never see the kids. We only see Ruffalo, him asking the kids questions and the kids giving him answers and him responding. And I just think, for some reason, I think that's such a strong decision, because the kids have nothing to do with anything. They don't even give him any information he can use. They say, oh, he looked normal or something like that.
That's right. And
then his response is, he looked normal. And then they cut, and it cuts. So I think it's such a great moment of, this is what you're going to be in for the rest of the movie, of getting a lead, the lead not leading to anything, and then just being unsatisfied at the end, right? That's exactly what this, conversation was. And he was unsatisfied, and we're unsatisfied with it. So why show the kids? We should show Ruffalo's reaction to getting the information from the kids. We don't need to see them. They don't matter. And I think that that's such a strong directing decision, to do that, because it just introduces more characters that we don't follow
100%.
Or need to be introduced to.
100%.
Honestly, the only reason we're introduced to the father at the door is because we need him to get into the house to talk to the kids.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only reason. And we only see him for 5 seconds on screen. That's it. Done. Yeah. So stuff like that, I think, is like why Fincher is Fincher.
Yeah. And I really love that whole sequence of the taxi section, because there's some really nice camera work that's happening in both of those moments. The moment of the murder sequence itself, right? That whole camera sequence is famously rock solid, right? There is not an ounce of wiggle in the camera. And that's because I'm pretty sure that's a digital creation. But if not, he still made sure to stabilize it within an inch of its life. Great. But then when Toschi shows up, and along with Anthony Edwards, I forget his character's name, but they're doing this whole once over of the crime scene. And that's all handheld. Fincher doesn't do a lot of handheld, but this is a really interesting use of it because, we're walking around the street. It's all very shaky and immediate. And I just love that juxtaposition of the killer versus the detective, right? The control of the killer versus the utter lack of control being demonstrated by the detective, right? He doesn't have control of this crime scene. They even had the freaking suspect right there. That got away. But I also think it represents kind of this detachment of the killer versus the humanity and the emotional stakes of the detective. And, that's a very strong emotional statement being made just through the camera work and deciding this killer knows exactly what he's doing. It almost feels ordained, whereas the detective is just showing up and getting his head around this thing, right? Because he gets woke up in the middle of the night and breaks his lamp, and then gets to the scene, and now he's trying to figure out like what's happening. What is this? Why does he go into the front seat? He's careless, but he's not careless. He waits for the guy to put it in the park. We're watching their brain try to catch up to who this guy is, and they're trying to get control. And I love that it's all represented in the camera work in a very simple way. Because throughout the rest of this film, there's not, I don't know how many other handheld shots there are, but it's beautiful. It returns to a locked off shot when he goes to interview those kids. And that's when we're kind of back to like, okay, now he's getting control of the situation, which is, as it turns out, still not very much control. As we see through the rest of the film. Yeah. The other little weird thing that I love between talking about those detectives is how they share things between each other, right? They share their car. Toschi goes and picks him up, and then they're sharing food. They're talking about food. Have you ever tried that Japanese cuisine? He's like, wait, what are you talking about? Like the raw stuff. I'm like, huh? Where's my animal crackers? Oh, they're in the car. I was trying to save those for later. Like, oh, okay. And then it starts to make sense because he goes, now they're waiting for the coroner to do his autopsy. And now he's like, this is what he wanted his animal crackers for. He's been through this before, and he knows I'm going to have to wait outside in the hallway. I'm going to want a snack. And so those were, I carry my animal crackers for that. Cool. But they also share food in the restaurant, right? The club sandwich. He's like, what are you eating? He just kind of hands him his club.
And he takes the tomato off the BLT. And I noticed that. I'm like, that is specific. And I wonder, was that a decision by Ruffalo, as it like his character doesn't like tomatoes, whatever, or if that might have been something that Fincher suggested. I don't know. It's like tiny things,
tiny little things, and he gets his fries after. Like they're sharing things, and yet he doesn't want to share with the media. And that feels very super under the radar, but a way of kind of demonstrating their headspace. Like cops between each other, let's make sure we're sharing everything. We're not holding anything back from each other. But when it comes to the media, we're not even going to share a cab ride. We're going to the same place. Forget you. You're kind of the enemy because you're holding us back to the point that they can't even get through all their suspect interviews, right? Like they got all these people, and that's all because of the media cooperating with the killer. So there's an interesting line of conversation that's happening between the killer, the media, and the cops, as well as the public. So that's all not without specific intention. When it comes to Fincher 2, the other thing that's really lovely and that I study and that I think is worth studying is the way he works through dialogue scenes. And my favorite of this is the interview when they go to meet Arthur Lee Miller, right? This scene, and I was just kind of at some point early in the scene, I started keeping the tally in my head. And I think there's at least like 15 angles in the scene of 4 people, right? There's 3 on one side of the table, and then there's Leigh on the other side. And that's really cool because there's so much happening in the scene that we want to be able to identify with. When Leigh is talking to Elias Gutierrez, I forget his name in the thing in the movie, but there's that conversation happening. So whenever they're talking, we want 2 angles for that. Like there's Leigh's perspective and there's Elias's. Okay, but what about whenever he's just kind of generally talking to him? Well, the reverse on that is a 4-shot from behind Miller. Okay, that's an angle. They go back to that one a lot. There's also an angle whenever, Elias looks at his shoes. And it's like, okay, so we're going to get an angle from low, just behind Leigh, that lets us see Elias seeing the shoe. And now we know that he's watching this guy's boots. Because, right, we know he's got those wing boots or whatever they're called. Great. But then there's another shot where we're going to want to watch Toschi see the watch. And to get into position for that, we're going to need 2 other angles just to set up that angle. And so now we're going to watch him jump the line through this cut, this cut, this cut. And now we can watch Toschi's eyes go to something, and we're going to do a reverse cut that we can see the watch on his wrist. And he's like, okay. So we notice him noticing that. Great. All these things are very explicit and set up for the editor to be able to move through all these things. A reaction shot here, a close up there, a wide shot here, and a medium shot here, a 2-shot there. Like, it's so specific and ordered. And I would be really surprised, actually, if they got any angles that they didn't end up using. Like, that would really surprise me. Like, as much as I was just dragging Fincher a moment ago, he's also doing everything with very explicit, attention to detail. He knows why he's doing something. He's not just doing it because he's up his own butt about it. He knows what he's doing for sure. And that attention to detail is what pulls us so deeply into a story. And I think that scene, along with pretty much every other scene in this movie, is a really strong weight. And that scene in particular, I think, is just great because every movie is going to have people in a room talking. Like, I didn't reference that scene in my last film, but I had the spirit of it inside me. And there's a scene where I was doing a table conversation between 3 people, 2 people and a phone. And I knew, and I promise it was just ingrained. Fincher had planted this thing in my brain through watching and studying his films on our show and just privately. I watch Zodiac probably every 1 or 2 years minimum. I just have an hankering for it because of this. It's just, there's something in there. And so I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to want this, and it's going to cut just like this. And it feels like clockwork. When it all comes together, man, there is nothing more satisfying than seeing it all just domino effect into the scene that you constructed in the script. It's freaking beautiful. And that's, of course, the other thing that Fincher does better than anyone is direct the script. He's not going to waste scenes. As much as you might think, yeah, this could probably lose 15 or 20 minutes. They're all serving a purpose. And he knows I'm building out a feeling, or I'm pushing out the story in a way that's going to create a feeling in the viewer. And that, of course, culminates in us wanting the same thing as a viewer that the characters are wanting in the story, which is this need of closure. We went through all this. We went through 3 hours of this story. We really, really want that closure, and you're just not going to get it. And all of that is built up through every single moment in this film being crafted for the viewer. Yeah.
Amazing.
My last little thoughts are kind of nothing to do with nothing. But I think it's just worth pointing out. A lot of why Arthur Lee Miller, I think, got away with it just based on this movie itself, not the whatever is actually the investigation. You get to the end, right? And it's like, it's Arthur Lee Miller, right? It's Arthur Lee Miller. We got someone who placed him at a party with that very first opening victim, the woman. and of course, McGow. And what does the guy say? Doesn't match. The handwriting doesn't match. The ballistics don't match. The partial doesn't match. Great. Except handwriting is junk science. Ballistics is junk science. Those things are not as useful or as precise as we like to think they are, or as cops often like to present them as, right? Getting a matched bullet to a specific gun, very subjective, which the whole point of a science is to remove subjectivity. That's why it's a junk science, but we'll never get admission. And yet movies and TV shows do so much damage to justice, literally speaking, because we as a juror suddenly think, oh, well, the ballistics don't match, and we know that's scientific, right? And it can be hard to probably move our brain away from that because it sounds very scientific. It sounds very sciencey and plausible. And so we put too much stock in some of these aspects. And so, yeah, it's worth pointing out to me as just a human living in this world that those things, handwriting and ballistics, not as reliable as you think. They are the exact same amount of reliable as a lie detector test. Like, just stop believing these things count for as much as you think they do. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because the whole time I was like, why are they just like so on handwriting? Like the entire thing is based on handwriting. Handwriting is like garbage. It is absolutely garbage. I would believe a lie detector before I would believe handwriting. Like, seriously, why is that? And he gets away because of that. Like, then it's there. All these conversations, like there's one handwriting guy who says, no, it's not him. There's another one who says it could be, but all they got to do. And then he even says, Detective Toschi says to Graysmith, like, yeah, all they'd have to do is call this other handwriting guy up to say, oh, no, it's not him. And that would just debunk everything that this other. It's like, why is it handwriting? Handwriting is so bullshit. Whatever. I'm glad you said something.
Yeah. I mean, even fingerprinting can be dicey. Like, they're not as unique as we think they are either. But certainly better. Hell of a lot better, especially whenever you can say the odds of someone else in this specific area at the specific time of the crime having the same fingerprints, it definitely becomes useful scientifically and, building a case and reducing your suspects or whatever. Whereas those other two things, bunk. Anywho, I think that's about it. I just find this story, my last comment, I think, I just find this story very compelling from the perspective that it's painting about society and trying to find an answer to something that you're just not going to ever get the satisfaction of knowing, and what it does to people. It destroys Graysmith's life is the way I feel at the end of the film. Like, it says he got back together with his family and everything was fine. Cool. That's amazing. I'm glad. But just the feeling that I have walking away from this movie is that this guy wasted his life on something, because from the Law and Order perspective, they're like, he points out, man, there's been 200 other murders. There's families that need resolution to these things. You're spending all your time and resources, and we as a department are spending all our time and resources on this thing when there's a lot of other killers and other people who need closure. Why are we spending all these resources in this way? I don't know. It's speaking in, or at least raising questions about our society and how we process different stories and different tragedies. I don't know what to make of that exactly, but I think it's worth these kinds of conversations where we just, bat it around and put some self-analysis in the limelight.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because it's a good conversation to have, honestly, because like when they were interviewing Arthur Lee Allen, he really made it seem like this is their guy. Like they were all the way they were looking at him were like, this guy, there's something to this guy. The way he was acting was very questionable. And so that made us as the viewer feel like, oh, this could definitely be their guy. But then I guess it was just the handwriting. Oh, it's not his handwriting. So then they just don't do anything with him at all. So I could understand how someone, like if it was somebody that I loved that got killed, I would be all over it, probably like Graysmith. I would probably like let it kill me. But it was interesting because he had no connection to any of the killers, Graysmith, and he wasn't even a journalist. He was a cartoonist. So why is he letting it destroy his life, him specifically? And I think Toschi says it really well, like later on in the film. He says, "What do you do for a living? You're a cartoonist? You know, I've been doing this for 25 years, like, or 12 years, whatever it is. Like, this is my job, you know, like, go away, basically." But then in the end, I think he brings a lot of, maybe he helps call out the fact that like fingerprinting or not like fingerprinting, handwriting is bullshit. Basically, he's like, look at all these other things. You're not doing your job. Like, cause I, as a viewer, felt like as much as I like Detective Toschi, I felt like they are not going, and maybe this is my 2025 brain and not 1969, 1975 brain. They are not doing the right things. They are not looking at the right things. You know what I'm saying? And so maybe Graysmith helped in some way call out the fact that, you know, handwriting is not the end all be all. Look at all these other things. When they met in the diner and Graysmith is pointing out all of these other things and you see Detective Toschi like, oh, okay. You're thinking, okay, maybe he'll go and get him. And they never get him. And you're just like, come on, you know? Anyway, it's an interesting conversation to have.
It really is. And yeah, I think he is a reflection, Graysmith is a reflection of us, the audience, right? Like, because has nothing to do with this. He's not personally impacted, and yet he's endlessly fascinated. I think he's a very specific reflection of society at large, being fascinated with true crime and serial killers in particular. But then, to your point, he also brings out things that it seems in the story, at least, that he missed. Toschi missed. It's like, it's less than 50 yards door to door. He's like, is that true? I walked it. I'm like, oh shit.
That was a great moment too, that I noticed of storytelling. It's a great example of this is important. So how do we, he's giving a lot of information. How do we slow everything down to right here? It's in the editing, it's in the camera angles, it's in the moment. There's like a pregnant pause right before he says it. And I mean, it's like a half a beat. Yeah. You know, it's like whatever.
But it breaks up the cadence. Yeah.
Exactly. It brings you in. He brings you in with the camera angle, and you're straight on Gyllenhaal, and then you're straight on Ruffalo. And it's just like boom, boom. And then there's a pause after. So there's a tiny bit beat before, and there's a big beat after, and you're just like, oh. And then something happens with the music too. Like there's some kind of sound or music that happens. Really well done.
That is craftsmanship. My God.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's almost no scene in here I couldn't just sit and bring into like Premiere Pro and start dicing it up and be like, oh, okay, this cuts into this. I mean, that stuff is more useful than you probably think. Like if you're out there and you're like, how do I get better? How do I ever become something even remotely close to Fincher? That's a great way to do it. Todd's been talking lately about like watching it with the sound off. That's great. Soderbergh does that. We've talked about that, I think, on not Jurassic Park, Raiders of the Lost Ark, when we did that. Spielberg, September a few years ago. But Soderbergh likes doing that. But also bring it into your own editor and say, oh, here's how many camera angles are in this. When does he bring in this camera angle? It's not just enough to say, oh, there's 15 angles. It's also knowing when you're going to cut to that angle. Because then if you know that, you might be able to save some time that day and say, okay, we're only going to get this moment. Then great. I'll get one full run through, but maybe I'll get my next 2 or 3 takes just from this point to this point. And that way I can save, 20 minutes of acting and performance, just getting what I need for this moment. Anyway, yeah, okay. What are you going to recommend this week?
So this week I'm going to recommend a film that we haven't covered and recommended, but I think we both are very big fans of. I'm going to recommend Room with Brie Larson, which is I don't know if it's a whodunit necessarily. You know who did it. You see but it's our first real introduction to Brie Larson. At least it was mine. And she is off the charts. And so is the kid in this movie. And the story is just brutal. And it's amazing. So yeah, I'm going to recommend Room.
Dude, great. I got to see a screening of that with the writer who got to adapt her own book. And that was my introduction really to Lenny Abramson, who's going on to do some of my favorite shows with Normal People and Conversations with Friends. And I remember walking out of Room, and I was actually on a date, and she kept trying to talk in the middle of the movie. So no, there was not a second date.
Yep, exactly.
But I walked out of that movie and said, that is everything I want to do with my life. It's perfect directing. And I could feel the directing making an impact on that story. Incredible cinematography that's emotive and pulls you in. And the acting could not have been better. Like Jacob Tremblay and Brie Larson are just out of this world. And it was just combined all in a powerful, impactful story. It just combined writing, directing, acting in a way that is everything I want to do with my life, man. So great recommendation. I've thought about throwing that out to review, and maybe we will at some point. It's just a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
It is a lot. But it's worth it, man. It's incredible. Yeah. In fact, now that I'm recommending it, I'm going to go back and rewatch it because it's been probably a decade since I've watched it. What year did it come out?
2017, I'm pretty sure.
No.
Yeah.
No. Really?
Yeah.
Is that recent?
Mm-hmm.
2015. Is it
2015?
Wow, I feel like it was before that. But that's crazy.
Okay. Nice. Well done. You know what? No, I watched it with you in 2017. That's what it was. So I'm going to recommend The Perfect Neighbor. This is a documentary. It's on Netflix, but
oh yeah, I saw it.
Crazy. Like, this is just genius way to frame a documentary on a true crime, because it really lets the moments speak for themselves. Like, it's almost entirely made up of body cam footage and like house footage of not surveillance footage per se, but like door cams, that kind of thing. And it really just lets you experience things as people were experiencing them. And it gives you a really amazing insight into a neighbor terrorizing her other neighbors using the cops. So that's a different perspective of what police go through, but also what people go through. And I thought that was just genius storytelling, and maybe the best, some of the best that true crime has to offer since, I don't know, the In the Dark podcast and Thin Blue Line, which are the normal two that I like to throw out when I praise true crime. But yeah, Perfect Neighbor.
Totally agree.
Go watch it. Yeah,
great recommendation. Yeah.
Freaking A. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to have some fun. We need a breather. And so, as great as Argo and Zodiac are, let's go see some Stranger Things. We're going to watch the finale, and then, I don't know, probably do our own recap of the entire show, but in particular, how it ends. So that'll be fun, because we haven't talked about it since season 2 on this podcast. So I think we'll have some fun diving into that, right?
Love it.
Yeah, so if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If you want to comment on this episode, you'll find it at thepestlepodcast.com/Zodiac.
And I love this quote. Alfred Hitchcock, the GOAT. There is no terror in the bang, only the anticipation of it. Is so smart. It is so smart. It is like this. It's the reason why we don't like jump scares.
Yeah.
Why they're cheap. Because it's not the scare. It's the anticipation of the scare. In fact, give me a moment where I know it's coming and never give it to me. Like that's the stuff that sticks with you because you don't have that. There's no crescendo. You know what I mean? You're just living with it. You're just sitting in it, you know? So brilliant.
Yeah,
Great quote.
those moments you really want that release of the big loud thing, right? The cut to the monster or whatever it is. And when you don't get that, there is something really powerful in it. Or to set it up and give it to us when we don't expect it is even better. But yeah, the terror is in the suspense, not in the bang. Yeah, Hitchcock, man. He knew his stuff. At some point, we'll cover a Hitchcock film, I'm guessing. But
yeah,
not
totally
yet.
should.
Yeah, fair enough.
Awesome. This was so much fun.
Yeah.
As fun as talking about Zodiac could be. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Hopefully you learned something or enjoyed our conversation at least. Please share us with your friends and review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a lot. And if there's a film you'd like to see us talk about or pick apart or just get our general thoughts on, please let us know. Who knows? Maybe we will cover it one day. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. I got nothing here.
Nope. Not today.
There's nothing.